Now, Mr. Danny Murphy, you made the headlines over the last few hours on a topic you've spoken openly about before, both in your newspaper column and here on talkSPORT.
True.
The reaction to this has come off the back of a podcast, the Ben Heath podcast. So for anyone who's not aware, this is just a tiny, tiny part of what Danny said.
It was more coke with me. Cocaine. I had a spell on cocaine and smoking some weed, and the drink was I could live without it.
Did you feel like you were addicted to cocaine?
For a while I was, because I got to the point where I didn't think I could do things without it.
Right, okay.
Which was nonsense.
Yeah.
Of course I could. And what you do, and anybody would tell you, like any drug or any addiction, you manage it initially, and then it just quickly... But yeah, I put myself... When I got help, I put myself around people who've been through it.
So, Danny, this was some weeks ago, wasn't it, that you spoke in this podcast? Tell me what you want to say this morning and some of the context behind what you want to say this morning.
Well, firstly, I mean, it's not new news. 3 years ago, I spoke about this in my column. And also, we chatted in here, us three, which was a great conversation a few days after I did that column. And then I did this podcast where I went into a bit more detail because he was triggered to ask me those questions based on the column I did 3 years ago and based on the chat I had in here. And because I'm past the embarrassment or the guilt or the shame of it, I gave more detail. So instead of, talking generically about using drugs, I told him, he asked me what I used. And that's created headlines. And then, unfortunately, the negative side of that is some people then think, it was... are you okay? Getting messages, am I okay? It's like people forget this was, 7-8 years ago. Feels like a long time ago, a different chapter in my life. That's why I'm comfortable talking about it, because it was so far in the rear view mirror.
And you're getting messages this morning, though.
Well,
yeah.
The positive side to it, and I didn't expect it, is because these headlines, I think it dropped yesterday, that a couple of people have reached out to me already, which was a hell of a surprise, I have to be honest. And that's one aspect of being honest and open about these topics that is beneficial. But, it's always difficult revisiting conversations like that because it just brings back negative memories. But yeah, it's come up in the headlines. Someone's made headlines out of it. That's what they do. I'm all right with it. It's fine. I can talk about it. It's just giving it some clarity because, as you said, we have spoke about it before.
We have, Danny, and I think it has been taken out of context largely because it's not new. It's not new. I remember it as clear as day with Simon chatting to you about this, and you were open about it then, and
well,
you've
I think
been very open again.
When you give more detail on something, words like cocaine become headlines, don't they? It's fine. I understand it. It's the world I'm in and the world we're in, but the reality is that from that conversation 3 years ago that I did, or the chat I did in my column and a chat we had in here, there was a lot of positives came from that, and a lot of people I'm now still in contact with because of it, so it's not all bad.
Yes. And you'd expect people to reach out to him. I fully expected that Danny would be hearing from people this morning about kind of a chat with you. Can you offer me help? Even although this is something that you spoke about many months and before that, many years before.
Yeah, we live in a very judgmental society. We've got politicians sending pictures of their private parts around social media, left, right and centre. I'm not one of those people that judges people. People make decisions in their life. They make choices. They make mistakes. They move on from them. Who's the arbiter of what judgment people should have laid upon them? Whether Danny was wise to pick up the conversation again, he'll question himself about, I suspect. But it's nothing. It's old news. Somebody made a choice in their life once upon a time. It wasn't the greatest choice. They moved on from it. That's the end of the discussion. And if someone wants to turn it into something more substantial, yes, drugs always invokes a reaction. But as far as I'm concerned, I have a relationship with Danny. I respect him, and he wants to talk about his private life once upon a time. He did. That's the end of the discussion. It's not new news. It's not old news. It's not any kind of news. It's just that he was a high-profile footballer, and people will weaponise it.
Yeah.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.